Okay, let's begin with our motivation. Sorry. So it's always a privilege to have the opportunity to generate bodhicitta, even if it's contrived bodhicitta. Just to have the time, the space, the inclination, the thought, the wish to generate bodhicitta. That is already a great privilege that most sentient beings on this planet, in this universe, do not have. So, although we generate the bodhicitta periodically throughout the day here at the Abbey before most major activities, we may just take that opportunity for granted. Oh, here we go again, generating bodhicitta, yawn. But really, when we think about how precious the thought of bodhicitta, that altruistic intention is, then we see how fortunate and what a privilege it is that we have the opportunity to contemplate it and generate it. So with that kind of happy, enthusiastic mind, then let's turn our focus to the benefit of all living beings and to clearing away our own obstacles and cultivating the myriad good qualities that are necessary to attain Buddhahood. Let's direct our mind towards that with great joy and great pleasure. Much better than ice cream. So let that be our motivation for sharing the Dharma this evening, and our motivation for everything we do in our life. So we're in the middle of the Gomchen Lamrim, particularly in the middle of the section on cultivating serenity. But I know a week or two ago, when I was sick, there was a community meeting, and I wasn't there, but I read the notes from it, and a few points came up that I would like to address. And since we have the Living Vinaya course coming up next week, there's like no other time to address it. So I thought to talk a little bit now and then go into the Gomchen Lamrim teaching. Okay, so one of the things that I heard come up again and again in the notes from the community meeting was people were they were wondering what is training, and they were saying we would like more predictability and we would like more clarity here at the Abbey in our community life and in our training. So predictability, clarity, those words came up again and again in the notes. Maybe you can't remember the meeting you had, or you can't remember what you thought back then, but because it's all changed since then. But anyway, those were some of the points that came out in the go-around. So it made me think, okay, predictability. Now, when in samsara do we have predictability? Yeah. Life in samsara is under the influence of ignorance, craving attachment, hostility, you know, not particularly wonderful things. And the nature, when we study about samsara, the nature is that it changes in every split second, never remaining the same from one moment to the next. That the things in samsara created by under the power of ignorance are unsatisfactory by nature, and that in this whole process there is no supervisory self. There's no self that's in charge, whether it is a creator God or manager of the universe that is in charge, or a self that belongs to us personally that should be able to control things. So given that this is what samsara is, which is what we're trying to understand through our Lamrim meditations, when we're meditating on the nature of samsara. So where in samsara is there predictability? The only predictability that we can really see is that things are changing in every split second. And we're not going to find any ultimate lasting happiness in samsara. And that there is no self in the whole process. Aside from that, is there any predictability in our day-to-day life? We think there should be predictability. Don't we? We think there should be. But, sometimes what we think doesn't matter because reality is what it is, no matter what we think it is. So we may think there should be predictability, and the world would really run much better if people were consistent, if they were predictable, if they acted the same way all the time, if they thought the same way all the time, if they did what they said they were going to do, if circumstances never changed quickly, the world would really function much better. And we can vote that that should be the case. Please look here. That bug is not the Dharma teaching. You should not let yourself get distracted by somebody passing a bug. Given that what samsara is, and that our wish for what samsara should be, are totally contradictory, then, who are we going to complain to that they should change what samsara is to make it what we want it to be? We want predictability, clarity, consistency. Who are we going to complain to? Well, we complain to other sentient beings, but they're changing moment by moment in the nature of dukkha and also have no self. So what are we complaining to? And what's the source of the mess that we're in that has no predictability? The source is our own ignorance. So if we want to do something about the lack of predictability, clarity, and consistency in our lives, the real solution is to transform our mind. It's not to tell the world how it should be, because everybody's been saying we should have more predictability and consistency and clarity for eons. Right? So it's interesting to think, here it is, this thing that I think is so important. And, you know, people go to managerial courses and study how to run organizations so that there's more predictability. Can you, in any organization, is there 100% predictability? Yeah. These courses are good. They're nice and they teach you things and, you know, they help. But can they bring 100% predictability? Can they tell you when people are going to get sick? Can they tell you when people are going to change their mind? Can they tell you when the electricity is going to go out? Yeah. Can they tell you when you're going to have a heavy snowfall and you're going to have to spend most of the day plowing? Yeah. I mean, we may want predictability, but let's get real. Okay, so that's one thing to think about. Yeah, when we're saying, I know, what are we doing here at the Abbey? Things are so unpredictable. I have a plan for the day and then it changes. There's a plan for training such and such, and then it gets changed. We make a booklet for the training and then the booklet gets changed. And we have a rota, and then the people, they have something else they have to do, so the rota gets changed, and everything's so unpredictable in this place. It's driving me crazy. Then, what are you going to do about it? Yeah, if we're in samsara, that's our responsibility. Yeah. And we might begin by asking if we're predictable. We want everybody in our environment to be predictable. Are we predictable? Anybody here who's predictable? Yeah. Okay. So it's something really to think about, that things happen due to multiple causes and conditions, not just to one cause and condition, or cause or condition, but many, many, many causes and conditions. And it's really mind-blowing when you sit down. Like if we were to sit down and think about all the causes and conditions that brought us all together to sit in this room, yeah, then we would have to go back through each of us, through all of our past lives. We would have to think about everybody who was involved in building this building and all of their lives. We would have to think of all the materials that are involved in our being together and where did they come from. And we could never really finish thinking about all the causes and conditions that led to that moment. Yeah, it's really impossible for our brain to encompass that. You know, many of these causes and conditions came from previous lives. We aren't even aware of what they are consciously. So seeing that there's so many causes and conditions, is it realistic to think that we should be able to control all of them? Or that somebody else in our environment who is in charge should be able to control all the things? Yeah. Do you think that there's one person in charge of this monastery? That everything depends on one person? Yeah. No, that can't be. We're all playing a role. Yeah. We can't even control our own minds, let alone each other's minds. Yeah. So, you know, where's this thing of I want predictability and control and clarity and consistency so that everything falls in line perfectly, just like the lesson plan that I was taught to do at university, where, you have your whole schema, whether you're an engineer or a teacher or an accountant or whatever, everybody has a schema, and this is how you have to do it, and you have to fill in all these things. Yeah, so we have all of that filled in. Does that make it certain that that's what reality is? We're just talking conventional reality, that things are going to happen according to the form we filled out and the plan we developed. Yeah. And this is one big thing I've learned from being the disciple of one of my teachers, is that as soon as you have a plan, you know what is not going to happen. Yeah. You don't know what is going to happen, but you know for sure that what was planned won't happen, but you're not sure about which part of the plan won't happen. So you've got to be there close by, because some part of the plan could happen when it's planned, but most of it won't happen when it's planned, but you don't know when it will happen. And I'm just talking about when the teaching's going to start, the time that the teaching starts. Yeah. I mean, that's simple, isn't it? You make a time, everybody shows up, and it starts. Not with my teacher. There's a plan. You know what time it's supposed to start. Don't count on it starting then. But you don't know when it will start. Okay, so this is training. Yeah, we think training is that nice little plan, the outline in the Anagarika booklet, the outline in the Shramanera booklet and the Shikshamana booklet and the Bhikshuni booklet, the one with all the numbers. And we think training is you study these things here, you take a test on those things, and if you pass the test, you've been trained. That's not what I call training. Anybody can read a book and pass a test, except for the kiddies, Reading a book and passing a test does not mean you're trained. Training is character building. Training is what goes on inside here. And there's, and they have, yes, all sorts of psychological devices to observe people and check their, consistent patterns to see if they're acting in a certain way. Yeah, this is how I got through college. I worked on psychology research projects. Yeah. Does that have anything, how much does that have to do with what is actually someone's character and what's really going on in their mind and how they're going to act in stressful situations and how they're going to act when their ego's challenged? Yeah, you read a book and pass a test, so what? Yeah. Belden, what was the name of the monk who was in prison for 30 years, who came to DFF? Belden Gyatso, right. So in his book, I remember him talking about one Geshe, somebody with a PhD in Buddhist studies, who, when arrested by the Chinese communists and was being interrogated by them, completely dissolved into tears and pleaded for his life and was hysterical. And Pelden Gyatso observed that, and it it really impacted him, like, wow, this person's had all that training, and when push comes to shove, what happens? Yeah, training is out the window because the training wasn't integrated in the person's being. Okay? So, yeah, if you feel very uncomfortable because we don't have 108 step lesson plan that is going to be done in 4 months with so many sessions each week, which are exactly 53 minutes and 22 seconds long, and that the test, you will have a test so and so. If the lack of all of that disturbs you, that is your training. That is your practice. Because what we're trying to create here is not people who can memorize a book and spit it back out at you. We're trying to create people who are flexible, who are compassionate, who can respond to whatever is in front of their face in a positive way that benefits themselves and others. That's what we're trying to do here, the kind of people we're trying to create. And so for that reason, things cannot be and should not be 100% predictable. But nobody here is trying to make things predictable. We're all trying to make things, nobody's trying to make things unpredictable. We're all trying to make things predictable, which just shows what a fallacy predictability is. Okay? So the training is to learn to adjust to the situation, not to be so rigid that we say, this is too unpredictable, this is too inconsistent, this is not clear. It's got to get clear. Where's a box? I got to put everything in a box. And then you're like this. Okay, so that's quite sad. Who wants to be here and be like that? Yeah. But if you're like that, it's not because of the stink bugs, and it's not because of the turkeys. Yeah, and it's not because of our friends who give us food. It's not because of each other. If we're like that, it's because of our own afflictions, our own false expectations. So coming up against these afflictions and false expectations, that is training. And that's what's going to make you it's going to make you change. So like I said, nobody plans it. We don't have to. Samsara by its own nature makes everything change. Yeah. Since I came back from Asia, I've been planning every day to work on this manuscript. Yeah. I've been back how many weeks? And I've done 12 pages. You people are so unpredictable. Every day I have a plan, and then you come to me with this, that, and the other thing. Okay? So think about multiple causes and conditions and how nobody is in control. Okay? Then also think about the fact that veiled truths, conventional truths, everyday objects, when we're working in the sphere of relativity, I'm not talking about Einstein, but just relative existence, conventional existence, okay, it's messy because everything we're dealing with exists by only being designated by term and concept, and nothing has its own essence. So even we use language to communicate, we're only approximating things. You know, when you really think about it, it's kind of amazing that we sentient beings ever manage to communicate at all. Because what we mean by different words is so different. Yeah. I mean, just last night, reading the reasoning book, the debate book. Yeah. And how that's written and how, you know, you could write it in a totally different way. Okay. So veiled truths, things are messy. There's no clear distinction between this and that. Yeah. The distinctions we make are, you know, they're arbitrary in many ways. And if we grab onto those distinctions as inherently existent, because we want more clarity, is this person a this? Are they a that, or are they another thing? Should they be able to read this book or that book or the other book? Should they sit here or should they sit there? You know? Depends on who you talk to, doesn't it? You know, even we say we're going to sit by ordination order. Oh, sit by ordination order means a bunch of different things to a bunch of different people. And what about some of the people who can't sit in ordination order and they need special circumstances to be in the room? Yeah. Are you going to make them sit in ordination order just because you think that's the way it should be? So there's, you know, many people on the floor, but somebody who can't sit on the floor, but got to sit in ordination order. So, and they're a tall person, so they're sitting right in the front row, in the middle of the front row. Tall. Everybody sitting around them is on the floor. But we're sitting in ordination order, but nobody can see. And that poor person feels very self-conscious. Yeah. So then they try, then everybody says, complains, I can't see, I can't see. So then the person sits on the ground. But then everything about them hurts, so they're moving all the time. And they feel embarrassed because of having to move. You know, are you getting what I'm saying? It's like we want predictability, but what exactly is that? And what are we giving up by trying to fit everything into some rigid kind of structure? Okay. So I had a few more things here. So when you're uncomfortable with how things change on a dime, and this happens not only here, but everybody who's listening from afar, you know, same thing in their lives. This is not unique here. Okay. So when you're uncomfortable with how things change on a dime, watch your clinging to permanence and stability. Instead of letting your mind go to, why are things like that? They shouldn't be like this. Turn it inward and, okay, what am I holding on to? My concept of permanence, my concept of stability, how are those functioning in my life? What do they make me think? What do they make me do? Okay. So what really is the problem? Is it that things changed suddenly, or that we had the expectation that things would go according to the plan? What exactly is the problem? Okay. So good to ask ourselves this. Yeah. What really is causing my discomfort? And when you really go deep, you see, I mean, just how deep our clinging is and how fear-based samsara is, how we're trying to make everything, you know, so it's secure in in an environment that is basically insecure. Yeah. We're all aiming for security, but who around us is secure and what around us is secure? Yeah. So very good, to think about that and try and let your mind chill out a little bit. Okay. Then another one, when you're uncomfortable with certain people, instead of listing all their bad qualities, check up on your own opinion factory. Yeah. Is my opinion factory working overtime here? I have this, that, and the other opinion about somebody else, so that this, even they walk in the room, they're walking wrong, they're not doing it right, they're interrupting my peace. Check up on the opinion factory and how it works. When you can't stand others' suggestions, their ideas, their ways of doing things, they put the cups upside down when you want them right side up. Yeah. They start things 5 minutes early when you come 5 minutes late. You think something should be painted this color and they paint it the other color. You want something made like this and they make it like that. Yeah. You expect the internet to work. Yeah. You expect the person who comes out to install the internet to make it better and not to make it worse. Yeah, you expect that it should work perfectly after the first day after the person came out, whereas it worked worse the first day, it worked worse the second day, and it was only on the third day that things got better. And then on the fourth day, the electricity went out and the internet went out again. Yeah. So, yeah. So it's very interesting. If this kind of thing is agitating us and driving us crazy, to look and like, what, I'm grasping at permanence. I'm grasping at true existence. Somebody suggests another way to do something. I don't like that way. My way of doing it is good. Yeah, so that's why sometimes, you'll see me give an instruction and the response I get is that. And then I say, okay, go do it your way, and then you'll learn from your own experience. Then you think, oh, she's such a pushover, except when she's not. She shouldn't be such a pushover. She should be more clear and consistent. But when she's clear and consistent, I wish you were a pushover. Okay. So, also, when you don't like the way things are done, check up on your arrogance. I have the one right way to do things. I don't like the way you're doing things. It's wrong. Yeah. You just do things this way. To be predictable, consistent, clear. Okay, so that's only this part of what I had written out, but I think that's enough for today, maybe? Too much for today. Okay, but I with the Vinaya training course coming up, I thought it was important to kind of say these things. Every time I tell Venerable Wuyen about things happening at this here, she just laughs. She says, that happens everywhere. But I don't think we want to show off our faults.
She'll see them. She'll see them.
Yeah, exactly.
If my brother and sister can see them, then we.
You mean they criticized us?
No, they just
Your
noticed.
brother and sister criticized?
They
They noticed? What faults do we have? Oh no, my reputation, our reputation. Quick. Yeah, write them a letter and say that they misunderstood. Okay. Now, to what we're supposed to talk about. Okay, so we, last time we talked about the 5 faults, which are different than the 5 hindrances, and the 8 antidotes. Okay, what's the first fault?
Laziness.
Laziness. What are the antidotes? In order. Faith, aspiration, or yeah. Well, a faith or confidence. Yeah. Second one is aspiration. Third, effort. Fourth, pliancy. Okay. What's the second fault? Forgetting the instruction, which means forgetting the object. And what's the antidote? Mindfulness. What's the third fault? Agitation and laxity. And the antidote? Introspective awareness. Okay. Fourth fault? Not applying the antidote. And its remedy? Applying the antidote. Duh. And the fifth one? Over applying the antidote. And its remedy? Equanimity. Chill out. Okay? Okay, good. So then Maitreya takes us through the 9 stages of sustained attention. So there's various ways of translating it. This is Alan's translation, sustained attention. Some people, I forget the other translations. Do you remember what they are? Anybody? Mental placement. No, but the 9 stages together, 9 stages of something, okay? But we're saying sustained attention, okay? So these are 9 stages that lead up to just before you generate serenity. So the 9th stage is not serenity. You still have to do some things after the 9th stage. Together with these 9 stages, there's 6 powers and 4 types of attention, yeah, that help to overcome different problems, different faults, okay, and help to stabilize the mind and make the mind and the object clear, okay? So the 6 powers. First power is hearing, okay, which means learning, okay? So we learn the teachings on how to cultivate serenity and how to place our mind on the object of meditation as instructed by our teacher, okay? So that's the first power, and through it, we accomplish the first stage of sustained attention. We'll go through all 9 stages in a minute, but here I'm just doing the 6 powers. So the second power is reflection. So by repeated reflection on the meditation object then we become able to stabilize our mind for a short while on it. And then that is what accomplishes the second stage of sustained attention. Okay. The third power is mindfulness. Here's our friend mindfulness again. So this is what brings the mind back to the object again and again. And through it, we accomplish the third stage. And then we continue to generate mindfulness of the object at the beginning of the session. And in that way, to strengthen, develop some stability on the object and prevent distraction. And so mindfulness also helps us accomplish the fourth stage of sustained attention. Okay. Then the fourth power is introspective awareness. So here's this one again. Yeah. And it sees the faults of discursive thoughts and the auxiliary afflictions and distraction to sense objects, and doesn't allow the mind to go in their direction. Okay, so it tames and calms the mind and becomes prominent during the fifth and sixth stages, because the introspective awareness is on the lookout, for discursive thoughts, afflictions, distraction to sense objects, and in particular on stages 5 and 6, restlessness and laxity. Okay. So, by the way, I'm just going to pause here for a minute. I've decided that the term that sometimes is translated excitement and sometimes agitation, Bhikkhu Bodhi translates it as restlessness. And I think I like that term better, because excitement we think is something good. You're excited about something, you're looking forward to it. But here in cultivating serenity, no, excitement's not good. So that's, I don't think that's a good translation. Then agitation is, you're agitated. And to me, there's a real negative connotation about agitation. And so I feel that makes it like too negative, too what?
Gross.
Too gross, Whereas restlessness, we are restless, We can't sit still. We can't keep our mind on something. The mind is especially looking for objects of attachment to daydream about. We can't keep the body and mind still. So that's why I after much reflection, I decided to use restlessness as that translation. Okay. Then the fifth, so introspective awareness, that's the fourth power. The fifth power is, again, effort. We see a lot of these same things come again and again, in the antidotes to the 5 faults, here in the 6 practices, the 6 powers, when we go through the 37 harmonies with awakening, these mental factors come up there. Okay, so it's quite interesting. It really emphasizes to us their importance. So effort exerts energy to eliminate either even subtle discursive thoughts, subtle auxiliary afflictions, and it also not only eliminates them, but it prevents the mind from getting involved with them. So it calms the mind, in the way effort directly doesn't calm the mind, but what it does is it prevents restlessness, laxity, and so forth that are interfering with the stream of concentration. And so in that way, it enables the meditator to focus the mind on the object and keep it there. So effort is prominent on the 7th and 8th stages. And then the 6th power is complete familiarity. And this is complete familiarity with the above powers. So when you have that complete familiarity, then the mind spontaneously remains in samadhi. And so this is the power that's active on the 9th stage. Okay, so those are the 6 powers. Then there's 4 types of attention. So this is how the mind engages with the object, how the mind relates to the object. So the first one is tight focus. So on the 1st and 2nd stages, when you're just trying to get your mind to be on the object, you have to focus firmly, tightly on the object. Yeah, so it's the first kind of focus. Second one is called interrupted focus, because now there's more stability because of the tight focus on the stages 1 and 2. Now there's more stability, and so now our focus on our meditation object in stages 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 is interrupted. So we're on the object, and then, distraction comes. We're on the object, lethargy comes. We're on the object, coarse restlessness comes, or subtle restlessness, or coarse laxity, or subtle laxity. So our stability is interrupted. Okay, Okay, so the second type of focus, or the second type of attention, covers 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 5 stages. Then the third type of attention is uninterrupted focus. So that's present with the 8th stage of sustained attention, because now we can focus on the object in an uninterrupted way. And then the 4th type of attention is spontaneous, and that's with the 9th stage, because the mind is just spontaneously goes with the object and spontaneously goes into concentration. Okay, so Maitreya talked about these 9 stages of sustained attention in the ornament of Mahayana Sutras, or Mahayana Sutra Alamkara. It was very interesting. I have a friend who is a Chan monk who teaches in San Jose at a Chan center there. And we had great debates all about Nagarjuna. So one time I was going there to visit him, and he was in the middle of giving a teaching. So I sat outside and waited. And I was listening to the teaching. And what was he teaching, this Chan monk? The 9 stages of sustained attention from Maitreya's text. Yeah, same thing we study in our tradition. Yeah. Okay, so let's look at the 9 stages. And again, there's many different ways of translating these 9. So, I picked one. The first one is called placing the mind. Okay, so on this first stage, we have to identify the observed object of our meditation and place the mind on it, even though our mind may not stay on it for very long, as we all know. Okay, so to get the mind to stay on the object, we have to learn to withdraw the mind from external objects and generate mindfulness on it. Okay, so earlier today, when people were distracted with somebody passing a piece of paper with a bug across the room to keep the bug from being squashed, okay, If such a thing like that distracts us in the middle of teaching, then what's going to happen when we sit down to meditate? Yeah. If every time when we're eating our meal, we hear a sound, we have to turn and look at who's doing what, how's that going to affect our concentration when we meditate? Okay. So, there's some things just to train ourselves to note it, but we don't have to look at it. We don't have to focus on it. We don't have to understand what it is. Yeah. Because when we're trying to develop serenity, we need to just keep the mind on the one object and not have it go everywhere. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we have to train the mind not to follow distracting thoughts and sounds. And, every time you have an itch, you got to scratch it. And every time your knee hurts, you have to move your leg. And every time, your cushion isn't right, you have to adjust it. And, if we're so sensitive like that to everything in the environment, it's going to be very difficult to develop any kind of concentration in our meditation. Similarly, if we're a person who worries a lot, or who is anxious a lot, yeah, then there's a certain a certain degree of, it's the mind. It's hard to keep the mind on something. Yeah. And so the mindfulness is all over the place. The introspective awareness is not functioning because when we're anxious, when we're worried, we go from one object to the next like this, don't we? Yeah, what happens? Maybe this, maybe that's going to happen. Maybe this is going to. What if this happens? What if that? Maybe I should do this. Maybe I should do that. How about this? How about that? So, concentration in one way is an antidote to anxiety and worry, but in another way, we have to calm our anxiety and our worry if we're going to be able to develop concentration. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, it's interesting. Watch the thoughts, watch the anxious thoughts, and just identify that's an anxious thought. Yeah. Put it in your anxious thought box. Yeah, you like having boxes? Put it in your anxious thought. That's an anxious thought. Don't sit there and, think about that anxious thought. Don't feed it. Yeah. Don't think, oh, that I never really thought about that before. I should, because this may happen. And if that happens, this may happen, the other thing may happen, the other, and then this, and then that, and then the other thing. And we're off. Yeah. Just identify anxious thought. Come back to your object. And if you can train your mind even in your daily life to identify your anxious thoughts and not follow them, oh, your life is going to be so much more peaceful. Yeah? Just identifying the thought can help so much. And not believing it. If we say anxious thought, and I better pay attention because that might really happen. Yeah. No, it's anxious thought. Put it down. Okay. So first stage, yeah. The appearance of the object isn't clear. The mind is filled with discursive thoughts that are like Niagara Falls. You can't even tell, any space between them. And at that point, we often think that, gee, my mind is so busy. It's never been this busy before. but it's always been that busy. We've just never noticed it. Yeah. It's like if you live near I-90, you don't notice the noise after a while. But when you come up here and you're not hearing the noise that you hear at home, then you go, oh, wow, where I live is really noisy. It's right by the highway. But when you're there, you don't hear it. So it's the same kind of thing. You start to meditate and it's like, this mind is crazy. It's worse than it was before. No, it's not worse. It's just you're noticing what's going on. Okay. Second stage is called continual placement. Yeah. So our first kind of objective as we're going through these 9 stages is to learn how to keep our attention on the object and not let it stray away. In other words, to gain some kind of stability. Yeah. So through practice, through empowering, through employing the power of reflection, repeatedly reflecting on the object, then the mind becomes able to stay on the object for a short time. It doesn't say how long a short time is, but whatever it is, I don't know if it means 20 seconds or what, but that's the second stage of sustained attention. And so we still have to have tight focus on that stage, to keep the mind on the meditation object, even though the mind can stay on it a little bit longer than it was before. But still, the time off the object is greater than the mind on the object with stage 2. On the other hand, we're beginning to calm the mind a little bit. So then the third stage is called repeated placement. So here our aim is to recognize when we've lost the object due to distraction and to put it back, put the mind back on the object more quickly. Okay, so here distractions are fewer. When they do arise, we can recognize them more easily and bring the mind back. So on the previous stages, below stage 3, we couldn't immediately regain our concentration on the object once our mind flew off, but now it's becoming easier to bring the mind back and easier to keep it there. Okay. But our focus is still interrupted because our concentration is not continuous, and scattering, to other thoughts and other objects still occurs, although we're able to recognize it more quickly. Then fourth stage is called close placement. So you see, we went from placing the mind to continual placement to repeated placement. Now we're on close placement. So as we develop more and more familiarity with the object, let's say the visualized image of the Buddha or whatever it is, then our forgetting the object, it decreases. Mindfulness is generated at the beginning of a session, and our attention remains on the object pretty consistently without getting so distracted. So the mind is more easily drawn inwards, away from the fantasy land of all these sense objects that are so attractive and sparkly. Yeah, so it's much easier to draw the mind in. So I wonder, with technology and people seeing things so quickly, one right after the other, and being in shopping malls and even traveling and seeing so many objects, at once, then the mind gets used to, being constantly stimulated by something new. Yeah, and constantly drawn outwards. So it's harder to bring the mind inside and keep it firm because all these external objects are just so tantalizing, you know? Yeah, and especially when you take drugs, then they're even more tantalizing. Look at that flower. Wow, that color yellow is amazing. Yeah, you remember that? Yeah? Okay. So, coarse restlessness and coarse laxity are present. So, our focus on the object is still interrupted, but nevertheless, the power of mindfulness has increased in strength. So, that's when the fourth stage arises. Then the fifth stage is called taming. So here the mind is disciplined and it's tamed so it can stay on the object almost continuously. Okay. The power of introspective awareness stops the mind from wandering to different emotions and thoughts and sense objects. Coarse laxity and coarse restlessness are no longer problems. Okay, but they may arise from time to time. Previous to the fifth one, subtle laxity wasn't a problem because single pointedness was difficult to attain. So, yeah, we didn't have a problem with subtle laxity because we weren't at the level where subtle laxity would even adversely affect our meditation. Okay, yeah. But now the mind may sometimes get too absorbed in the object so that subtle laxity arises. Yeah. And so subtle laxity and subtle restlessness may interrupt our focus, but it's much easier to restore our focus through the power of introspective awareness. And on the fifth stage, you really become aware of the benefits of concentration and you really begin to enjoy it. Okay. Sixth stage is called pacifying. So here again, the power of introspective awareness. Yeah, so through that, our conviction that it's important to abandon distraction becomes very firm. And all resistance and dislike for concentration practice is gone. Yeah. So earlier, we weren't really so sure that distraction should be eliminated because some of our distractions were pretty interesting, and like all these new psychological approaches to look at our childhood and new psychological things to analyze this and that. And, these are coming up and they're kind of interesting and we should focus on them, and maybe we need to, but just be aware that that's going to create an obstacle if we're developing concentration. Yeah. So those kinds of things you're going to need to look at, but not during your concentration sessions. Yeah. So you don't want to repress them and say they don't exist. That's not healthy. You need to work them out, but you need to not be so enchanted by them. Because sometimes our psychological things are quite enchanting, aren't they? Yeah. Okay, so so we're on 6. So during the previous stage on 5, concentration was tightened in order to eliminate laxity. On 6, it might be too tight. And when the concentration's too tight, then we become restless. When it's too loose, we have laxity or going into lethargy. Okay. So subtle laxity may still arise occasionally. So it and subtle restlessness can still interrupt the focus on the object. But we've matured through practice, the power of introspective awareness can sometimes identify restlessness and laxity before they arise and deal with them. So they say that about subtle restlessness. You're not totally off the object, but the mind's beginning to shake a little bit. So here we're able to, that subtle restlessness, we're able to identify that and do something about it before the mind goes off. So that accomplishes or leads us to the sixth stage called pacifying. Seventh stage is thoroughly pacifying. So now, even if subtle thoughts or subtle emotions, destructive emotions come into the mind, or they're easily pacified. So subtle laxity and subtle restlessness arise from time to time. So our focus is still interrupted, but on 7, by the power of effort, then we're easily and quickly able to stop the subtle laxity and subtle restlessness. Okay, so here mindfulness, introspective awareness, effort are well developed, but non-application of the antidotes may still occur. Okay, so you have the introspective alertness that notices that there's some problem with your concentration, but you don't always apply the antidotes. That happens before, but it's especially strong here on the 7th, right before, on the 7th, I should say. Then the 8th one is called making single-pointed. And so here, as a result of mindfulness and effort, laxity and restlessness are not able to interrupt the concentration. So our concentration is uninterrupted. Okay, that's the another focus, uninterrupted concentration. So when we sit down to meditate, we can immediately bring to mind the object of meditation, and our concentration remains on it continuously, and only a little bit of effort at the beginning of the session is necessary to discern the details of the object and place the mind on the object. Okay. After that, the mind can stay on the object just through the power of effort. Okay, so that's when the 8th stage arises. So our concentration is getting much longer here. Then the 9th stage, so the 8th stage was called making single-pointed. The 9th stage is called placement in equipoise. So here, as we've been progressing, the power of complete familiarity becomes stronger, and effort to maintain mindfulness and introspective awareness is no longer required. So you don't even need that little bit of effort at the beginning of the session like you needed on the 8th stage. But now just the wish to meditate is sufficient. You sit down and, the mindfulness on the object arises and the mind enters into meditative equipoise. Yeah, where the mind effortlessly and naturally remains in single-pointed concentration without having to deliberately evoke mindfulness. So that's how familiar your mind is with the object and how strong the mindfulness is that you don't need to even evoke it. So the focus on the object here is spontaneous. It's not even uninterrupted on the 9th stage. And single-pointedness continues for a long time. The sense consciousnesses here are totally absorbed and no longer respond to external stimuli during meditation. So this 9th stage is the highest concentration attainment within the desire realm. So this person, This meditator still, while they're in meditation, they still have a desire realm mind, but it's quite strong concentration. It's a similitude of serenity, but it's not fully qualified serenity yet. Okay, so that's the 9th stage. So there's still some other things we have to do before we get to serenity. So I'm just going to go on because we don't want to wait until next week to get there, do we? Okay. So the first 3 of those 9 stages help the mind, which is generally fluctuating and moving, to abide on the meditation objects. That's the first 3 stages, their job. Second 3 stages are the means to stabilize the mind that's already abiding on the object. Okay, although the stability can still be disturbed by coarse restlessness and laxity, but it's those second 3 stages really help to stabilize the mind. And then the last 3 stages are the means to gain full control of the mind that has achieved stability. Okay. So as we progress through these 9 stages, the strength of our mind and the power of meditation increase, clarity and stability correspondingly increase, and this results in mental and physical peace and happiness. And they say your complexion becomes youthful and radiant, you feel light and vigorous, and your dependence on coarse food decreases. And this is, you still haven't attained full serenity yet. Okay? Now, so now the next thing is to cultivate and then attain mental pliancy and physical pliancy, and then the bliss of physical pliancy and the bliss of mental pliancy. Okay, so remember pliancy, it was the complete antidote to laziness. Yeah, and so pliancy, sometimes it's translated as flexibility, but what it means is that the mind is very serviceable. You know, the mind doesn't put up a fight, it isn't full of resistance, it isn't complaining all the time. But your mind becomes very cooperative. That'd be nice to have a cooperative mind. Okay, but so then we still have physical dysfunctions, which are factors that relate to the winds or the prana inside the body. And so these physical dysfunctions, this dysfunction of the winds, makes the body heavy and uncomfortable when we try to engage in virtue. Okay? So this is the one when the alarm rings and the morning goes, and your body says, I need more sleep. Yeah, okay. But through increased familiarity with concentration, physical dysfunctions are overcome. Yeah. At this time, they say the brain feels heavy, though not in an uncomfortable way. And there's a very pleasant tingling sensation at the top of your head, as if a warm hand were placed on your crown after you've shaved your head. Okay, so that sensation occurs as the dysfunctional winds leave from the crown. Okay, and immediately after they leave, the dysfunctional mental states are overcome and mental pliancy is attained. Okay, so that's the first one, mental pliancy. Okay, so mental pliancy in general is a mental factor that accompanies all virtuous minds and enables it to be directed towards a virtuous object and to stay there. However, here, we're not just talking about any old mental pliancy, but a special mental pliancy that is the serviceability of mind. Okay, because if we were just talking about any old mental pliancy, it's there with every virtuous state of mind. So we should have already had it a long time ago. But no, this is a special mental pliancy. Okay, that is a serviceability of mind, a lightness and clarity of mind, coupled with an ability to put the mind on whatever virtuous object we wish it to be on. Okay, and the mind no longer resists being directed towards virtue, or it's very happy to meditate and enjoys it. Yeah, it isn't going, when's this session going to be over? Yeah. Okay, so this mental pliancy, special mental pliancy, in turn induces serviceability of the winds that are flowing through the body. Okay, and because the winds, by the mental pliancy, then the winds that power the afflictions subside. And a wind of physical pliancy pervades the body. And the body's lack of serviceability for meditation is overcome. So this is physical pliancy, which is a lightness, a buoyancy, a serviceability of the body, so that the body can be used for whatever virtuous activity we want, without pain, hardship, fatigue. Our body is not a nuisance. Okay, it feels very light. Yeah, and they say like almost you could ride on your own shoulders. I don't know what that feels like, but when you can feel like that, then you know you've got this. Okay, okay. So this is so that's physical pliancy, and that physical pliancy immediately leads to the bliss of physical pliancy, which is a very blissful tactile sensation. So the body feels so comfortable, really fresh, and very cooperative, yeah, very pliant. So then, as our concentration continues, there's a sense that the body melts into the meditation object. Yeah, you can become so familiar, so close with your meditation objects that they say it's almost as if the mind melts into it. And so at that point, the bliss of mental pliancy is experienced. And the mind becomes very happy, very buoyant, almost too much so. Yeah. And so they say here that you feel like you could focus on each atom of a wall. Okay. And then after that, there's a sensation on the top of our head, this time like a cool hand being placed on a freshly shaven head. Okay. And the mental bliss decreases a little bit. And when that mental bliss becomes stable, then you have the unfluctuating bliss of concentration, and unfluctuating mental pliancy arises. Okay, and at that point, you've attained serenity. So, serenity is also known as access concentration, which in our system, going from access concentration to the first dhyana, you go through 7 preparatory stages, and so this is the first one in it. Okay, so when you've attained serenity, there's many kind of signs. Yeah, so the body and mind are flexible and serviceable. Physical and mental pliancy arise quickly when we sit down to meditate. The mind is very spacious, and it can abide firmly on the meditation object so that even a loud sound won't interfere with concentration. There's a sense of great clarity. And in post meditation time, although your mind is no longer in access concentration, due to the influence of having been in that concentration, afflictions don't arise as strongly or as frequently, and craving for sense pleasure decreases considerably. Okay, so the body feels light and at ease. The 5 hindrances don't bother us anymore. We can transform sleep into meditation, and yeah, it's very good. If you read the books, I met this woman who wrote the books. There's 2 of them that I know of about the Thai forest monks. And this was in the 19th century and early 20th century. And so some of them, their concentration was so great, and they meditated out in the forest. This was before the Thai chopped down so much and destroyed their forests. So these monks were still meditating there. But so sometimes they would encounter a tiger or a snake or some kind of threatening being. And their solution to that was they would immediately enter into concentration, immediately go into samadhi, so their senses are not functioning, they're not paying attention to any of this. They would remain in samadhi for a while. And when they came out, their body was okay. They were not harmed by the snake or the tiger or whatever it was, because it seemed like these animals could sense that there was some special quality about people having this kind of concentration. So pretty amazing. Okay. So that's it for tonight. And next week we will continue. Yeah, questions?
When we were reviewing last week's notes and we looked at laziness and found that, and looked again at one of the antidotes being pliancy, we thought, that's a result. How can that be an antidote early on when you're looking, when you can barely sit down? How can that be an antidote to laziness?
It isn't.
Okay.
At those early stages, because it only becomes an antidote much further along. Yeah. That's why you go through the first 3 first. Yeah.
2 questions from online. The first is from someone in Singapore who wants to understand the difference between mindfulness and introspective awareness. And
okay, one question at a time.
Well, she goes on to give an example of what she thinks it could mean. Mindfulness means making offerings to the 3 jewels every day, as this is the daily activity that we promise to do, while introspective awareness means that we do not break our promise and continuously engage in the activity.
Mindfulness has different meanings in different situations. If you've made a promise to make offerings every day, and you invoke mindfulness to remember your commitment to do that, then that's mindfulness of your commitment. Okay? But mindfulness is not the mind that makes the offering. That's a mind that is called non-attachment or generosity or something like that. Okay? And then introspective awareness would be the mind that, checks, I have this commitment to make an offering. Have I done it today? And have I thought about it well and made the offering well. That's how introspective awareness would be used in the situation of making offering. But introspective awareness is not making the offering, okay? It's just another mental factor that helps you in that particular situation.
And then someone else says, Maitreya is said to be the next Buddha.
Mm-hmm.
Where do these writings that are referenced come from? When did he write them?
Yeah, well, there's different stories in the Chinese tradition, and also scholarship, academic scholarships. They usually consider Maitreya to be a person who is different than the Maitreya who's going to be the next Buddha. Okay, so, like you have many people called John, you can have many Maitreyas. Yeah, don't get them confused. Other people say that Maitreya is abiding in the Tushita Pure Land, and that a Sangha went there to study with Maitreya and then brought these teachings back to earth. So, two different views on it. Mm-hmm.
You said that when you can get too absorbed in the object and then subtle laxity arises. But when I think about getting really absorbed in an object, I don't think of holding the object loosely. I think, so how does that work?
Okay. But first of all, it's something at an much more advanced stage of developing concentration than I would say, at least I have, So, but it's the mind, the focus on the object is a little bit too loose, so the mind gets lax. The clarity, the intensity of the clarity decreases because the mind's a bit too relaxed. Yeah, does that make sense to you? So then you tighten it, then you make it too tight, then restlessness comes. So that's why they say that getting this thing of, how loose or tight, it's like tuning, a violin string. Yeah.
The first time I read about the 9 stages, I remember I got very excited because it was a schema, a rubric, a structure, something enough of this woolly instruction, right? Finally, here's a step by step. And then after the first retreat, I got so discouraged because I realized, I'm on stage 1 and I'm really not progressing. So maybe you could talk about healthy ways to relate to schematics like this.
To realize that when the Buddha teaches, okay, he has to set things down from the beginning all the way through to the end. And he's definitely going to give us the highest, most complete result. Yeah, because if he doesn't explain that, then we're going to have no idea of where we're going. And people who are at that level won't know what to do. So the problem is that our mind thinks, here's a schema. I should try and get to the end of it as soon as possible so that I can say I've done that, check it off my list, be there before anybody else, and then present myself as an achiever of this thing. Yeah? So it's our same old way of relating to everything for some people, who have that kind of habitual way of looking at anything. Yeah. There's 9 stages. I should be at the 10th stage next week, by next week at least. Yeah? What stage are you on? What stage are you on? Oh no, maybe I'm behind them. Oh, this can be terrible. If they get those stages before I get those stages, then my self-respect is shot, my reputation is shot. What kind of grade am I going to get? Yeah? Okay. So we have a lot of old patterns we have to release. And everybody has different old patterns. We don't all have the same ones.
Just a comment to say that I really appreciate the fact that by just not turning and looking at everything that's happening around you is a wonderful first stage to cultivating this quality. To not be, sounds, visuals, voices, always wanting to know what's going on it's right there, right at the very beginning of just daily life to start fostering that ability to just keep the mind right here.
Yeah.
It's really wow.
Yeah. And, and to keep the mind on what our business is and not let it go to other people's business and what our business isn't. Yeah. Which is. Yeah. Okay. I think there's a lot of meaning in our precept of only look at what's in your own alms bowl and don't look at what's in other people's alms bowl. I think there's actually some very profound meaning in that. Okay, we'll end here.